Hello everyone, today is December 22nd, 2023, and I'm sure many of you know that yesterday was kind of an important day in solar cycles and season cycles. Yesterday, December 21st, was the winter solstice, or at least for here in the Northern Hemisphere. For the Southern Hemisphere, it was the summer solstice. Last night was the longest night of the year, and yesterday was the shortest day of the year for us here in the Northern Hemisphere. For the Southern Hemisphere, yesterday was the longest day of the year, and last night was the shortest night of the year. 6 months ago, it's the exact opposite, or 6 months from now, it's the exact opposite. 6 months ago, or 6 months from today, will be the summer solstice for the Northern Hemisphere, the winter solstice for the Southern Hemisphere, and it will be the longest day of the year for us here in the Northern Hemisphere 6 months ago, 6 months from today, and it'll be the exact opposite in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, to understand how this works, I got a globe here. It's kind of an older globe, but it's still a nice globe. I got this one too, but this one's very big. Very expensive, as you can see. Yeah. It's got this big metal eagle. Yeah, it's nice. It's very nice though, but it's big and hunky, very wonky. So we're gonna go ahead and use this one. This one I have right here. So to understand how the seasons work, or to understand how it works, this lamp, y'all can't see, it's off screen, but as you can see, I'm kind of holding it. This lamp represents the sun, just off to my left. I guess you're right, depending on how the phone is angled. So the Earth stands. The Earth is only straight up and down twice a year, and that's usually March 21st and September 21st, around that time period. And that is the spring and autumn equinoxes, depending on where you are in the world. Northern Hemisphere, it is March 21st is the spring equinox. Southern Hemisphere, March 21st is the autumn equinox, and it's the exact opposite. September 21st is the autumn equinox for the Northern Hemisphere, and September 21st is the spring equinox for the Southern Hemisphere. I'm talking fast, so I might be confusing words. But if you want to fact check me, just look this up yourself. So right now, let's find America. There's America. Okay. I know some of you live in other parts of the world, but I live here in Southeast Texas. So we're just going to be basing on that for now. So right now, again, this is the sun over here at this lamp. Right now, the world, the Earth, is currently doing this. The Northern Hemisphere is currently further away from the sun, and the Southern Hemisphere is the closest because it is summer down there. That's why it's hot in the summer and it's cold in the winter, of course. The Earth does not, I'm hopefully none of y'all believe this, but the Earth does not get closer and further from the sun. The world would either freeze or would burn up. The equator, as you can see, is always roughly the same distance from the Earth. It doesn't tilt that much. The equator is always roughly the same distance from the sun, no matter what time of year it is. That's why it's always at the equator. That's why it's usually warm and always usually the same temperature. They don't have extreme heat. Well, I guess they do in some places, like around Africa. There's not too much extreme heat though. It's actually the further you get from the equator, the more extreme you'll have the heat. For example, you know, I was looking at the weather forecast this past summer, and this past summer here in Southeast Texas, 2023, we had one of the hottest summers on record. And I remember looking at weather temperatures around the world, and when it was 105 degrees here in Houston back in July, it was only like 85 down in Ecuador. But yeah, it's because it's closer to the equator, because it's always kind of the same distance from the sun, no matter what time of year it is, it's always a little bit, it's always kind of the same. It's always kind of the same. It doesn't fluctuate that differently. Whereas, you know, you'll have 100 degrees in the summer and 40 degrees in the winter, 30 degrees in the winter. It fluctuates a lot because there's more of a drastic change. So also another thing I'll talk about is daylight times. So the equator always has, no matter what time of year it is, if you're right at the equator, whether you're in Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, Gabon, the Congo, Uganda, Kenya, Indonesia, wherever you are in the world, you'll always notice that you always have pretty much perfect 12-hour days and 12-hour nights throughout the year. It will always be the same. That's not the same. For example, here, it's not really on here, but oh yeah, it is. So I don't know if you can see, but here in Southeast Texas, we are right on 30 degrees. As you can see, we're right on the 30-degree line. So here we always have, like, for example, last night we had 14 hours of darkness, and yesterday we had 10 hours of daylight. However, 6 months from now, or 6 months ago, we will have 14 hours of daylight and 10 hours of darkness. And then 3 months ago, or 3 months from now, at the equinoxes, when the Earth actually does stand straight up and down and doesn't tilt any direction, we will basically have about 12 hours of darkness and 12 hours of daylight at the equinoxes in late September or in late March, even here in Southeast Texas, 30 degrees north of the equator. But yeah, right now, the Earth is currently doing this. The northern hemisphere is tilted away. So today will be slightly shorter than yesterday. Today will be slightly longer. Sorry, I talk fast, so I'm trying to, you know, give a little bit of a lesson here, but when I talk fast, I get my words mangled. So today will slightly be longer than it was yesterday, the day will, and tonight will be shorter than last night was, because from here on until June 21st, every day will get longer and longer and longer until after June 21st, and then every day will get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, so on and so forth. And as I said, the equator is the only place in the world where that doesn't happen. The equator, you have perfect 12-hour days and 12-hour nights every single day of the year. So another thing we'll talk about is the constant darkness we see at the poles. Now, this lamp doesn't perfectly reflect the sun. I guess it kind of does. So if you can look at this globe right here, you can notice there's like a shadow right here and there's light. So during the winter, it's like no matter, okay, yeah, this way. So during the winter, the poles are always, when the Earth is tilted away here at the North Pole, there's always kind of a shadow up at the pole, giving the pole basically 24-hour darkness for 3 months of the year during the winter. And at the South Pole and Antarctica, it's the exact opposite. It's basically they'll have 3 hours of constant daylight because the bottom is tilted towards the sun in December, in January and February. And then later on in the year, from like May to August, I think, it's the exact opposite. The sun is basically shining on the North Pole 24/7 for 3 months, and you see nothing but complete daylight all for 3 months, constantly for 3 months. And then the South Pole is the exact opposite. Antarctica will be shrouded in darkness for 3 months of the year, and I think that's, yeah, May through August. Antarctica is completely shrouded in darkness, and then here at the North Pole, I think it's November through February, it's completely shrouded in darkness because of the way the Earth tilts. So yeah, I thought this would be a fun thing to talk about, interesting thing to talk about, because yesterday Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I cannot talk properly because I have so much. I'm trying to make sure that I say the right thing, and I'm trying to make sure that I can give a good lecture properly. That I'm scared to death I might be saying the wrong thing. But if you want to look more into this yourself, go ahead and do it. Don't just take my word at it. But if you'll want to take my word, I guess fine. I'm not lying. If I do say something wrong, it's because I misspoke. But yeah, I hope you'll understand that. Just one more time. Currently, the world is doing this. That's why here in the Northern Hemisphere, our nights are very long and our days are very short. And it's the exact opposite in the Southern Hemisphere. And then in 6 months, it'll be the exact opposite. And, oh yeah, another thing. So, I don't know if your country does daylight savings time, but here in the United States, we do, with the exception of Hawaii and Arizona. They're the only states that do not do it. I personally think daylight savings time should be abolished. The time we're on right now, which is standard time, is real time. Daylight savings time is fake time. It's, you artificially make the day longer in the evening. But even that is kind of a misnomer. But as I just said, the longer day, the day is not actually longer necessarily. What happens is when you turn the clock forward, you gain an hour a day. You put the hour of daylight more in the evening rather than in the morning. The day feels longer, but it's actually not. That's why, you know, in November when the clocks go back, it feels like, oh my God, the days are shorter now. They're not. The day after daylight savings time ends is only like a minute or two shorter than the day before, or maybe a couple minutes shorter. Again, depending on how far you are from the equator. The further you are from the equator, the more drastic the daylight and darkness shift is. Another example is when here in Houston in April, the sun rose at about, I think, 7 a.m. Yes, about 7 a.m. in April on daylight savings time. So back in April, I was in New York City, and at 7 a.m. in New York City in April, it's pretty much broad daylight outside. But at 7 a.m. back home, and yes, I know it's an hour ahead, but 7 a.m. New York time is 6 a.m. here. But by the time of 7 a.m. here, the daylight wasn't as bright as it was in New York, even at 7 a.m. But that's because New York is further from the equator, the more drastic the daylight shift is going to be. So right now, we have 10-hour days, 10 hours from sunrise to sunset here in Southeast Texas. But in New York, I think it's only like 9 hours or maybe 8 hours. However, in the summertime, we have 14 hours of daylight, but they have like 15, somewhere around that. So it's very drastic. It's the further you get, the more drastic it gets. That's why in Alaska sometimes, this time of year, they only have like 4 hours of daylight, but in the summer they have 20 hours of daylight. So yeah, the further you get, the more drastic it gets. And then at the poles, as I just said earlier, you'll have constant daylight for 3 months in the summertime. Same thing down there, it's just different months of the year. And then you'll have 3 months of darkness in the winter. So yeah, I guess that's it. That's all I can really talk about. That's all I can really think to say. I think I've said everything. If y'all want to look more into this, go ahead and do it. I think y'all should. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. So yeah, I hope you all have a happy Yule. Yeah, that's what yesterday was. Yesterday was Yule, the winter solstice. So I hope you'll have a good Yule. But yeah, thank you for joining for another daily life and adventure of Ben. Today we had a little bit of a lesson. I think I should probably do this more often. Let me know if y'all want to have more lectures from me about topics I know a lot about. Let me know in the comments. Do you want more lectures from Ben about topics that Ben knows a lot about? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for joining me. I'll be posting a video Christmas because I'll be going to midnight mass. Good to show you how that is. And thank y'all.